Thank you so much, guys, for engaging. I can see it's chilly, it's cold. Yeah, even in my side, it's very cold. I'm actually having tea while I'm doing this session. So hope you guys are keeping warm also as we're doing this. Yeah, a cup of coffee is always good. As programmers, we say we normally turn tea into code. Yeah, so I'll just present my screen. And I feel like we should do like a small recap of what we did yesterday. You can see someone says dark. I don't know if that is a weather condition. That's a new one. Okay. Yeah, so what we did yesterday, we covered HTML, and I'll start with a very basic level of creating the HTML file, and then we can continue from there. Yeah, so what we said is, first of all, you need to create a folder where you'll be storing all your web documents in an orderly manner. So the first thing I'll do is create a folder, and then I can call it this day, so it's on Wednesday, and just call it like that. And then inside the folder, I can go and now create the HTML document. And you remember, for you to create a HTML document, you need to put a .index.html. You need to identify it like that. So when you create that text document, I'll zoom my screen a little bit. You create such a document, you can rename it to index.html, which is very important so that your computer realizes that this is a website. So I'll just rename, and then I'll call it index.css, and I'll make sure that I erase everything there. Index.html, and like that, it will change. Yes, hello. I zoom in. Okay. How about now? Yeah, okay. Maybe for those one who cannot see my screen, you can try to drop off and join again. It normally works. Yeah, but if one of you is seeing my screen, that means that I'm actually presenting. Yeah, so that's the maximum zooming that I can do for now. Yeah, so what I've done is just created the notepad file, and then I renamed it to index.html as we did yesterday. So this is a small recap. And when you open the index.html file, you can just double click on it and it will open on a new browser. So I'll drag my browser there so that you can see, and it's a blank screen. And you remember we said learning HTML is like learning syllables so that you can write your novel. So I'll put it sideways. You remember the good coding practices. You have your document very well aligned on your screen, and then you can open this with your editor of your choice. I'll go with Visual Studio Code, and I said the reason yesterday is because VS Code has a lot of features that you can take advantage. And you'll see one advanced feature that we'll get today. So my VS Code is opening. I'll put it here. Let me just tidy my screen like that. So we have the website, and we have our editor, like what we did last time. So remember we had the minimum structure of the boilerplate for HTML, and we had a doc type, a head, we had a body, and several components like headings and paragraphs. So for us to get started very easily, I can just put an exclamation mark. So my computer normally takes a while to load. So we can use a shortcut to create that boilerplate. Just a minute. It's taking a while, but maybe you can try it from your end. Just put an exclamation mark, and your boilerplate will appear here. So let me just get it from my other sites. So the boilerplate is the foundation of web design, and we covered it yesterday. So I'll just pick it from our PowerPoint. Yeah, so that's the boilerplate. So that is what you'll need to build your website. And when we refresh our browser, then we'll have those elements appearing. And this is what we did last time. So what we want to do today is to try to style our website and make it more appealing. And that brings us to our topic for today, which is introduction to CSS. So I'll just close this, and then we can get started on today's topic. Okay, having done that summary, things will be more easier now because we'll be using that basic concept to make you understand how CSS works. So our main topic for today is styling HTML pages with CSS, and these are the topics that we are going to cover. First of all, we'll define the term what is CSS, and then we'll look at the syntax and selectors in CSS. And then we'll go to the CSS universal selector, proceed to the CSS grouping selector, and then we'll define how colors are written in CSS. And finally, we look at the box model, which is very important when you're doing styling in your website. So first of all, to define CSS, one thing you need to note is that CSS is not a programming language. And we also said that to HTML, when we are describing HTML. So basically, CSS is a styling language, and it's basically used for presentation. And one thing that you'll notice when you're using CSS, it will help you to be very creative. Because when you're using CSS, you're not limited in any way. You can try to write your own ideas as long as you follow the syntax. So let me show you an example of a website that was developed without CSS, and then we have another side where it has a CSS. So here is our website. So we have the website on the left hand side, it doesn't have CSS, and on the right hand side it has CSS. So notice the difference. You'll notice that the one on our right hand side is more appealing. You can see the buttons are very neatly placed. You can see the image is centralized, and it has been given a very nice size. And also the text. If you look at hi, I am Team JB, notice that I am Team JB is yellow in color. If you compare with the other text on the left hand side, it's just something that we did yesterday, very minimum level of programming. So for you to make your website to be a step higher, you need now to implement CSS. So that's the advantage of using CSS, which brings us to our topic for today. So when you're dealing with CSS, you need to understand its syntax. So when I'm talking about syntax, syntax is basically the rules that we normally follow when we are doing something. For instance, if you're writing English, if you're writing your composition, then you need to have very nice paragraphing. You need to paragraph your work. You can have also maybe a title for your composition, etc. So that's a syntax for English language. Even for CSS, we do have a syntax, and the syntax is the one written here. So we'll have a selector, and we'll have those brackets. those braces, and then inside those braces we put the properties. So the properties are what defines how we are styling our page. So for instance, you can try to style the color, the text, etc. So you'll see that in a few as we go on. So we'll go to a concept called selectors in CSS. Selectors are just ways in which we can find HTML elements. And yesterday we learned about tags. We talked about the H1 tags, which we have heading 1 up to heading 6, the P tags, the anchor tags, and the images. So for you to style these components, then you need to understand what selectors are. And in CSS, we have 3 types of selectors. The first type of selector is called element. The second one is called ID. The second one is called class, and the final one is called ID. These are the most popular selectors, but we have other ones. Yeah, so because they are widely used, we'll begin with this as a basic level. And then when you want to advance, you can learn about other selectors. So with the elements, elements are basically HTML tags. And right now we have learned HTML tags. We learned the H1, the heading tags, the paragraph tags, the styling tags like the bold, etc. So when you want to use elements, you normally use the HTML tag. So let me just show you how this will work in actual sense. So I'll move to my Visual Studio Code again. Let me just remove that. And then Lewis, you can let me know if there are questions on the chat. So I'll open my Visual Studio Code and I'll delete everything so that we have a blank HTML file. And now we want to learn about the element selectors. So let me just refresh my website so that you can see what is happening. And I'll try to zoom in. Yes, okay. So notice what we have done here on the website side, we have made our writings to be red in color, and they are in the center of our website. They are in the center. So if I open the website, I just zoomed in very much, but they are actually at the center, as you can see from this section. So we have used CSS to do this particular styling, and that brings us to what we have called the elements. So with the elements, if you look at this particular line of code here from line 5 up to 8, we have used the p tag, which is the paragraph, and that p tag we placed a property of text align and a value of center, and we also put another property of color, and we give it color red, and that's why you're seeing the color has changed. We can also change the color maybe to a different color. I can say yellow. Color. Let me just delete the entire thing. So you can change the colors. So right now we are using the CSS. Something wrong is happening here. This color yellow. Like that. Let me just refresh my browser. And you can see the color changes to yellow So what happens is that we normally select the elements. So you can see in the P tag we have every paragraph will be affected. What is written here, and me too, and me. So basically what we have done, we have styled our website using the element attribute. So the element are basically the HTML tags. So let us go back to our slides. Okay, so basically when you want to style CSS using the elements, you'll be picking the HTML elements as you have done with the P tag. We place the colors and we also made it to appear at the center. So that's how you work with the elements tag. So we can go to next. Another way of styling our HTML element is by using class. So the class selector selects the HTML elements with a specific class attribute. So let me also show a demo of this. I'll open my Visual Studio Code again. So this is an alternative method and it's more powerful than the other. I'll open my browser and I'll delete everything again. So let me pick the code. And then refresh. Okay, maybe to explain the code so that we can be at par. This is a basic thing that we learned in HTML. You remember the doc type and the the HTML tag is there, the head and the body. So we haven't done anything much. We have just added only the styling attribute. So we're using CSS with our website. So you remember in the first example, we were styling our website using the tags, like the P tag. We use the P tag to style it. But right now, what you're seeing here, we're using .center to style it. The structure of CSS remains the same according to the syntax that we learned. We have properties and value, but right now we're using a class. So the main advantage of using the class is that you can use it only once and it can replicate to other scenarios. So for instance, if you wanted to make H1 and the P tag to be red in color, then putting the one class attribute of center will help us to make everything to be color red. And that is what you're basically seeing here on the screen. So the element, the big element here on H1 is red in color, and the P element here is also red in color. Yeah, so basically that's how we use the class selector, and you need to use this the full stop option. So let me go back to the slide. Yeah, so basically that's how we use the class attribute, and you have seen it in action. So we can go to the next way of styling our CSS classes. We can use the ID attribute, and this one you notice that we use the symbol hash. For class, we use the dot command, and you saw that in the code. So with the ID selector, the ID selector uses the ID attribute of a HTML element to select a specific element. So I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code. And as usual, I'll clear everything. So let's look at how the ID selector is used. First of all, let me explain the code and then we can look at the outcome later. So again, we have the basic structure of HTML, but right now we are styling with something called an ID, as you can see here on line 13. So line 13, in front of the picture.
To interrupt. So we have a question. How are you selecting different attributes in the Visual Studio Code?
How are you selecting different attributes?
Yes.
Okay, I feel like that's a broad question. How will I answer that? Yeah, so let me go back to the slide to clarify on that. Just a minute. Let me go back to the slides. Okay, I can answer that question with this particular slide. For you to select elements in your HTML document, you need something called selectors, and selectors is what we are actually learning now. So if you want to use elements, you're basically using the HTML tags to style your attributes. I don't know if that's clear. Hey, Lewis, maybe can the person who asked the question expand more on that?
Yes.
Okay.
You have been taking us through different uh, attributes,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not getting quite well how you select now. I am in elements, I'm in class.
Oh,
Uh, mm,
oh, I get what you're saying now. Oh, okay. Okay. So let me present something here. Okay, so basically with all these attributes, you can use all of them. You can use all of them when you're writing your HTML code and when you're doing the styling for your website. But what you'll notice is that one attribute has more advantage over the other. That's why I wanted us to cover how these attributes work first, and then we can do a comparison. But we can just list it out here. So when you're using the element, we're using the HTML tags. So this one is a little bit limiting because you'll be required to write a very big CSS line of code so that you can achieve a good styling. So as an alternative, you'll rather use a class attribute because it is more reusable. So at the point in which you need to settle on one attribute, you look at the factors like how much code are you writing? Are you writing many codes? Do you want to reduce the amount of code that you're writing? So to ensure reusability, that is where we transition to other attributes. And for this final attribute, it's called the ID attribute. This one is more specific, and it's normally used for linking elements of our website, etc. I don't know if that clarifies your question, Rosalind.
yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe any other question before we continue? Any other question, Lewis?
No question at the moment.
Okay. Okay, let's go back to the ID attribute. We'll go back to my presentation. Yeah, so when you're using the ID selector, we use this hash when we are doing our styling, and I'll show you in our Visual Studio Code. Just a minute. But actually, when you go through my slide, it's very easy to follow through. What you'll be doing, you just be picking the code and then you can see the outcome by yourself. And again, we're doing a recording, so you'll get to understand it properly also. Okay, so for now, this one we're using the ID attribute, and it's defined in line 13 after the p tag. So you can see we have written ID para 1. So we're describing is the first paragraph. And now on our CSS structure, we'll use that hash symbol. That's why we said ID. They use that hash symbol. And then you can now write the value of the attribute paral1. You can see it's here. And we can now put whatever styling that we want. So for this example, only hello world will be styled red, and we'll see in a few. So let me just refresh this screen, and you can see hello world is color red. So that's how you style while using the ID. So basically, you can use all the attributes. You're not limited. But for you to make your code more better, there are some attributes you need to consider more than the others. So let us go back to the PowerPoint slides. Yeah, so we have done a comparison of the attributes. So the element, we use HTML tags, and that's why you're seeing here, if you're implementing it in CSS, we use H1 and the basic syntax, which was the brackets, the curly brackets, and what attributes you want to change, like the color. You want the colors to be blue, etc. So any HTML element can be used as a selector. So that's basically it on elements. So on the class attribute, this attribute is more better because it is reusable in many components. So you don't need to rewrite your code a lot. Yeah, you don't need to rewrite your code over and over again. So with this attribute, you can kind of reduce your code into smaller chunks. And then finally, we have the ID attribute. This one is more specific, and an element can only have one ID attribute. So finally, we'll cover CSS Universal Selector. And I don't want to copy paste this code. I want us to write it line by line so that if you're following, you can actually do so. Yeah, so let me just remove everything here, and we can write our code line by line. So remember yesterday we said the first thing that you write here is the doc type, and that is it. So when you're creating HTML, we start with doc type, and then we will create a HTML tag, which will be open and closed, like that. Then the next item that follows is the head tag. You open and close. You can press enter to make my code to appear more neat. And then after the head tag, we can have a body tag. And in the body, here is where we put all our items. So to shed more lights on what we have done, I'll put my browser here side. Let me refresh because we don't have anything to show. So I'll just write a small title. Remember, we use H1 for writing titles. So we are learning CSS. And then I can put a paragraph. And I'll go to that website we call Lorem Ipsum. And I can pick one paragraph. Let's go with this. Like that. So I don't want the website to be very complicated. Let me just work with these few items. So when I refresh, the items will appear on the screen. I zoomed in my screen really. Let me try to zoom it once so that you guys can be able to see properly. Yeah, so we have just written this. So because you have learned styling, the first selector that you have learned is the HTML tag. So these HTML tags, you can use them for styling. So what you can do, inside this head tag, we can put a styling attribute, and this is where CSS comes in. So you can put a style attribute, and you open it and you close, like that. So I want us to make this particular heading to be red in color. First, the first method I'll use is the element selector. So for us to use the element selector, the first element that I'm seeing is H1, and you remember those curly braces. So I'm just writing how we covered the syntax of CSS. So we write like that, the braces. Then inside here, we can write the property. So I want to change the color of the first heading there, which is we are learning CSS, to color red. And then you finish up with a semicolon. So when you refresh, you'll notice that we have styled that particular heading. If I wanted to style the p tag while using the element, I'll just write p, and then I'll open and close the braces and say color. Let me put it to be blue in color, so that is a little bit different to there's a comma there. Yeah, so you put a comma and then you can style the other. So right now we have styled our paragraph and we have styled our heading using the element selector that we have just talked about. So that is the first thing. So what if I wanted to use the class selector? Notice how this, my line of code is very big, from line 5 to 10. If I wanted to reduce this, and if I wanted to style them the same, I can just use the class selector. So notice what I'm doing with my h1 tag. I'll come here and I'll write class is equals to, and then I'll put, I'll call it class 1. So the same class, I can put it also on the p tag, like that. And now we can try to style it with the class selector that we have just learned. So notice that my selector is called class 1, class 1. And I can say I want everything in my page to be yellow in color. So I'll say color yellow. Notice everything goes yellow in color. So when I write with the class selector, it is more easy. You can see my code is more smaller because we can group things together. So I'm still answering what the question that Roslyn asked. And then we can also use the ID method. So for that, I can just, let me add it. We have class, but I can also add ID. Say ID is equals to ID1. And if I wanted to style ID, remember ID is denoted with hash. And you can say ID and put those braces. And we want the color. I'll pick a color brown. So that will definitely style our heading with another method. Yeah, for some, oh sorry, ID is called ID1. Made a mistake there. Yeah, so you can see ID goes brown in color. So all of those selectors can be used to achieve the same result, but they are used differently and they have one advantage over the other. So apart from that, we can use the wild, the universal, the the universal selector, and the universal selector is denoted by star. So if I wanted everything in my website to be green in color, I'll just put a star here and follow the syntax of CSS. I'll put color and then say let it be green in color. So when I refresh, everything will be green in color. So this universal selector is normally used to set the font of your website so that you can have very nice fonts. And you know, for the font, you need to be consistent. So you'll say everything in your website to be maybe Arial Black or whatever font that you need. So that's how we use the selectors. So I hope with that practical experiment, it is more clear. We can continue. I'll go back to my PowerPoint slides. Yeah, so we have covered the different ways we can style our CSS. The final one was this, the universal, which takes everything in your website, and if you want it to be blue in color, it will do it for you. So another thing that we need to understand is that we don't want to have very big lines of code. You can see for this one, on our left-hand side, we are styling the H1, H2, and the P tag with these attributes. So we want everything to be color red and everything to be at the center of our website. So you can reduce all of this by using the grouping selector, and you need to use the commas. So if I wanted to style H1, H2, and the P tag together, I can just put H1, comma H2, comma P, and what particular attribute that I want. So this is a simplified method of reducing your code to make it more easy to read, because as you're writing your code, people will be reviewing it, so you make it more appealing for people. Okay, so we look at another concept called how to load your CSS. So how do we add our CSS content into our browser? So the first way that you've seen is this inline CSS. So within the head tag, I added the CSS style inside here. So let me just remove that so that we can remain with the bare minimum thing or with the HTML structure. So this is just the boilerplate, no HTML, no CSS included. So let us learn about how we can now add our CSS to this particular document. So first of all, you can use inline CSS, and I'll show you how it works. Secondly, we can use internal CSS, and finally, we can have external CSS. So with the inline CSS, we style it on the specific tag. So if it is H1, you put the style attribute there. So let us go back to our Visual Studio Code, and I'll put side by side so that you can see what is happening. Remember, I removed the CSS. So right now our code is purely HTML and we don't have any styling. So we want to use the inline styling, and what we'll do here, I'll remove also these attributes to make the code more easy to read. Okay, so we'll write the CSS here. So this is called inline styling. Put style is equals to, and then I can say I want to change maybe the color. I want the color to be blue, like that. So if I wanted this heading to be blue, I can use the inline styling. So let us refresh, and you can see definitely our heading turns blue. So that's one way we can add CSS to our HTML file. So that's called the inline styling. I'll remove that so that we can cover the next concept. Let's go to the next concept, and then I'll talk about the advantages of those methods that I'm just showing. So we have the inline styling, and you've seen how we are using it. and then we have the internal CSS. And this is the example that we were doing. So on the head tag, we included the style tag and we started styling. So that was the internal CSS. No need to repeat that. And then finally, we have the external CSS. So from all of these methods of including the CSS document, this is the most preferred method because it is easy to reuse the CSS code, and your code is very neatly defined. So I want us to do this example so that you can see it practically. So I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code, and what external CSS means is that we need to create another file for the CSS. I'll minimize my screen a little bit. For just a minute. So notice we have been working with only one document. So with the external CSS, we need to add another document. A quick way that you can do, you can just click on this icon here, written new file. So if you click on it, you can create a new file. So I can call style.css. So it needs to end with that .css extension. You remember for HTML, it's ending with .html. So for CSS, it's .css extension. So if you're using Notepad, what you'll do, you'll just go to your folder. Let me bring my folder. For Notepad users, you need to go to the folder where you have your HTML file, and just with the same approach, you right click, select new text document, and then you can call it style.css, and make sure that you delete everything, including the .txt extension. So you just call it style.css. So no need for me to create another because my Visual Studio Code has already done that. You can just remove that. Yeah, so right now we have two files, and we will include that CSS file in our heading. So we will use this statement, link rel for relationship, and we want to link a CSS file. We'll write style sheet, and we'll give a link to that CSS file. Remember, we used href yesterday to link people to other sites like Google by using the anchor tag. So here in href, you can put a dot and a stroke, and now you can select your style.css file. So with this method, we are making our code more professional and easy to read for people. So this is the best method that you can ever use. And with this CSS file, you can just import it to other working HTML documents, and it's easy to use. Okay, so we can try to maybe put a style. You can put the universal styler, and the same syntax that we normally use for CSS. You put the color to maybe green, like that, and you'll notice that your website will change accordingly. So that is how we can achieve the external CSS. So let's go back to our page. We're almost done. 2 slides left. Lewis, is there any question?
No question at the moment.
Okay.
And
unless someone has, they can just type on the screen and maybe just raise their hand. Okay. Okay, so one thing to notice is that CSS normally prioritizes the selectors, and we learned about the element, class, and ID selectors. So the ID selectors is normally given high priority with CSS in comparison to something like a class selector, which is given medium priority, and an element selector. And maybe a quick way to understand this is by looking at this code file that I've just written. So here I wrote a p tag, a small paragraph with a statement called hello, and I've included all the selectors. So we have the ID and we have the class. So if I were to create a CSS style with all those attributes, the final result, you'll realize that all the text will be blue in color, despite the fact that we said that the p tag should be black, and also by using the class selector, it should be green. So CSS will pick the ID selector as high priority. So that's one thing to note. And then let's look at how we can define colors in. Yes? There's a question. How are we linking the external CSS and the HTML? Or how are we linking the external CSS and the HTML? Okay, so right now I'm presenting my Visual Studio Code. So after creating that CSS, this external CSS, we use this particular link to link them together. So let me just also include it in the chat so that you can also try it on your end and let me know if you're able to make it work. I don't know if that's clear, Roslyn. Hello?
Not really.
Or not really?
I saw you created two files, one HTML, the other one CSS.
Yes.
External CSS. So you said you want to style and link. So I'm not seeing how you're linking the two.
Okay, are you using Notepad? Oh, you just okay. Yeah, so normally you see this href attribute. This href attribute is like a link. So it normally links files together. So here is where I've linked my CSS document. So this is just a path for the computer to follow so that it can get this particular CSS file. So this href attribute is the one that helps us to link that CSS. Is that okay? Yeah, actually you're right. So we are doing, you see we have done the styling here on this other file. I mean .css file. Yeah, but it will style everything in my HTML file to green. So you just separate your styling here. All the styling you do it on one document. And for the HTML, you'll just continue writing your HTML tags. Okay. Okay. So you can try practicing it more to everyone in the call. I'm sure following along might not get you there necessarily. So if you get these PowerPoint slides, just look at the code, how I've written them, and it will be very easy for you to understand after you have done this particular session. So yeah, in CSS, you can define colors in so many ways. You have seen me defining colors with their names. There's a time I was writing red, yellow, green, and blue. So there are other methods that you can actually use to define colors, which gives you a bigger range of color selection. So like the hexadecimal color code gives you like 16 million colors that you can actually use for your development. So this is more widely used on on styling cases because it gives you a wide variety of colors that you can use for your website. So it normally use something called hexadecimal, and this FF are indicating how much red color are we putting to the website, and then the second the two zeros, the next two zeros are defining how much green color we are putting. And you can see on the color I've put this one to be 00, so the green color will be 0, and finally the blue color will be 0. So overall we'll get a red color with this, and for this other option we'll get a green color. So for the hexadecimal colors, they are more versatile, and you can get different shades of colors that you can try to work on with your website. And also another method is the RGB color. So for this one, we have split color into red, green, and blue. So these are the primary colors. When you combine these colors in some way, you can get colors like white and other colors that appear in the rainbow, etc. So they're great for tweaking brightness and creating gradients in your website. So you can explore on this more maybe later. Yeah, so for now we don't have much time to cover a lot on that, but that's how you can define colors in HTML. So I've written a code here that can help you see how we have been implemented colors differently. So here the H1 I use the name, so I can just call it red. But for the p tag, I tried to use the hex color. And then finally, for creating a background, I tried to use the RGB color. So maybe we can see that in action and see how it will appear. Let me just paste it here, and then we can get to see. Okay, so here you notice this paragraph, we use the hexadecimal colors, and this is how it is denoted. And then finally, the RGB color give us a very nice green color. So yeah, you can try to explore that and see how you can tweak it, and you can get different colors combination. Maybe even in the hexadecimal, I can say let this be FF, and we can refresh our code, our browser, and you'll see it changes. So that's how you can define colors in CSS. So the final thing, we'll cover the box model. Yeah, so every element in CSS has the box model. So whenever you write a paragraph or even you add an image, there's something called the box model. So you normally have the content, maybe the text or the image, and then that content is surrounded with a padding. So there's a space between the content and a border. So that's normally called the padding. Then for the border, this is the edge around the element. And then finally, we have the margin. So this is the difference between the element and the entire website. And to bring that to actuation, I'll need to show you. I'll add that. I'll add something here down so that you can see how it works. And then I'll put some styling. Let us refresh. So look at this. So when you write a text, all this that is surrounding that text is called the padding, and that is what I was trying to bring about. And then after the padding, we normally have the border that surrounds the entire element. And now outside that element, we normally have the margin. So all of this is normally used for styling. So if you want to maybe put your image at the center, you normally work with the box model for you to achieve that. So for now, we have covered everything on CSS. Maybe we can have a small question and answer, and then I'll show you what assignment we'll do. So maybe questions? Okay. So let me just specify on the assignments. We will share the notes with you guys so that you can practice, and we'll also share the recording. So for the assignment, this extends what we did yesterday. It's actually an advancement of the assignment that you were supposed to do yesterday. So you guys were supposed to create an about me page, just a small portfolio about yourself, or rather you can just create a class timetable. So what you'll do, you'll try to style your headings, your paragraph, list, tables, and images by using the CSS concepts that we have learned today. So make your page visually appealing and try to keep it clean and readable. And then you can submit it to my email address. I'll put it in the document. So thank you so much. That is all from me. Have a great evening, guys.